welcome to another episode of Shell's Place. We are back again and we're continuing this journey of understanding self. I'm Tay, your mentor, and here with my co host, Shell, our certified life coach. As always, a great pleasure to be here with you. Yeah. The last episode, we talked about understanding yourself. And we focused on the part of self hatred because a lot of people deal with that, right? And sometimes knowingly or unknowingly. Right? And they allow disrespect on themselves as well too, personal disrespect, and they disrespect themselves. So now we've talked about how these things can affect us, where they may stem from, but now we want to talk about how do we get through that? How do we get to the other side? So I'm going to let you start us off with that.
So we want to work on our self-worth and understanding ourselves. So we start out with getting our traumas together in the beginning because first of all, we have to understand why we are wired the way we are. And this is why we encourage people to do it by themselves. But as we're doing it, we're on TV now, so everybody can do this together. But actually you have to do this on your own by yourself. And so everyone's going to be a little different because their stories are different. Their raising is different. Their cultures are different. Depends on where you came from. So we want to start with acknowledging our traumas. Traumas is a big part of learning self because you know what took you down, what holds you down, what keeps you down. So we'll let Tay talk about traumas a little bit.
Yeah, so most of the things, think about what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a trauma? Most people will think of some form of abuse or,
Or
molestation,
Yeah.
something like that. That's the first time they think of a trauma.
Yeah. But if you haven't had that, then what?
Right. So now you think of, okay, well, what kind of trauma could it be? And I'll give a personal example. I locked my cousin in the closet. She was about 3 years old. And we didn't want to be bothered with her. She cried all the time, but she was left with us to watch. And so me and my other cousins, we decided to lock her in the closet. Now here, a 3-year-old, we've created a trauma for her. But there was something special that we talked about before that I really love, and you heard it first here on Shell's Place, because I ain't never heard this nowhere else. Tell us what that whole scenario. We locked this kid because she's crying. We don't want to deal with her, so we lock her in the closet so we don't have to. But then we get in trouble because we did that. Tell me about that.
I called that a three-way trauma. And you laughed at me, but
I did.
It was a three-way trauma, and you didn't understand why it went three ways. And I said, well, in your case, the trauma started with you. And that was because someone left their kid with you because they weren't being responsible in the moment. And I won't say our parents weren't responsible. Sometimes parents have to work. You got to do what you got to do. Right. But sometimes leaving a little kid with another little kid might not be the answer.
Right.
Because this is what happens. But the trauma for her is she wanted to go play with her age group friends and have fun. But she was being held back because she was forced to watch a smaller kid and keep track of that kid. So instead of her being like, I don't want to babysit, it's not my kid, she made that kid pay by locking them in the closet, and she caused trauma to that kid. So now we have 3 steps of trauma going on here. And we're not playing the blame game because we don't want to blame people, but it's just what we know, and it was what we were dealt with. Your parents have to go to work. There's sometimes you just have to watch your siblings. But sometimes that could be a trauma for one of your siblings. I was a younger one too. My older siblings used to get mad because they always had to watch me. And then it was trauma for them because there was times they couldn't go out and play, like she was unable to play with her friends. So the way she found to play with her friends was to lock that kid in the closet. And then they went to play. So did we leave a kid in a trusted resource? No. So those are ways traumas come along. So we had 3 people in trauma because that parent obviously had to go take care of something. It's the reason why she left them there with them. That parent had to do something. So there was trauma all the way through all 3 of them lines. It just affected people in different ways. And that's a trauma that sometimes people will put on hold, and I'll tell you why it's on hold. I don't want to blame anybody like my siblings or anything, but I often heard that my siblings couldn't do certain things because they had to take me along or watch me. Now, granted, it's trauma for them because they're forced to watch me because I'm not their kid, but I had to go and then I stopped them. But do you think coming up, I want to hear that I stopped them from doing things because I was in the way? That made a trauma for me, like she made a trauma of that child. So those are different type of traumas. They're not traumas that's meant to really hurt people, but it's something that you carry. Like, dang. So what did that trauma do for a person like me, who was in the same position as her younger sibling, locked in and blamed? I didn't want nobody to help me. I used that trauma as an adult by saying, I don't want to ask anybody for anything. Now, granted, my siblings they came to take care of me anyway because that's what they knew. But I didn't want to ask them for anything. I really didn't, but they came to help anyway. That's just what they did. But it was a trauma for me to feel like I don't want to take from them because I've already stopped them from living because they had to babysit me. So that's a trauma that I built in and I use fuel. So now everywhere I go, I'm in a relationship with a man. I don't want you to come too far over here. Can't let you do your manhood because I don't want to feel like I'm taking from you. These are the things that traumas do to us.
And that's the point where we brought out that it's not always a drastic trauma as like abuse or things like that. Right? It can be little things that we didn't even think about. Right? We had that conversation. I had no idea that I was a part of having trauma dealt towards me.
Mm-hmm.
I only thought about her in that instance, that I did this to her.
Right.
What the steps that led to it. Three-way trauma. You heard it first here on Shell's Place.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there.
And then what did it do in her case? She always helps and takes care of everybody when she shouldn't be there. Because she feels responsible for everybody's demise. Because she got in so much trouble from locking that kid in the closet. She'll never lock anything away from her. Whether it's bad or not. She'll never lock it away from her. So she'll keep bringing and inviting things in that's not meant for her. That's what the trauma did for her.
Yeah. That was a big trauma, boy. Man. And you realize it. And so now that's the part where we come to when you write down or think about these traumas that you have, don't think of that it had to be some dress because, like you said, a lot of people grew up in great families.
Right.
Great household stuff that happened. Maybe a trauma didn't happen until later on in their life.
Right.
So don't think of it had to just be a childhood trauma.
Right.
It could be at any time of your life. So keep that enough out of your mind.
Now look up definition of trauma for them so they can set out, because I had a wonderful life and I have wonderful siblings, but that little trauma there, carried on with me forever. And I always felt like I held them back. Now, my siblings, they took off and went and did great things, but they still had to, come back and take care of me, and they still and at the age that we are now, my siblings to this day will still come and take care of me. I don't care what I'm going through. What it is. So it might have been a trauma to them as well. But I'll tell you what, if something is going on, my siblings is there. Right. They are right there. Mm-hmm. So when we say the word trauma, we're not, like she said, looking definitely for bad trauma, but something that affected you in a way that you carry.
Yeah, and this molds you. And the definition here says trauma is a severe emotional response to a distressing event that can have lasting negative effects on a person's mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. And it says trauma can be caused by a number of events, accidents, crimes, natural disasters, physical or emotional abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, death of a loved one, war, poverty, racism, discrimination. So trauma is not just one thing.
Right. It's everything that affects you.
Yeah.
And you're going to use it in your self-worth.
Yeah. And I like to, it finishes and says that trauma can cause a range of short-term and long-term reactions. So we can be traumatized in the moment, or it can have a lasting effect in our behaviors take over what that trauma did to us. We act and respond. You may have someone who maybe was physically abused and they go and they have a lifestyle where they're going with different people because that's what they feel that's the norm.
Right.
That's how they get rid of their pain, right? Or whatever other thing that is, that situation, people can carry on a lifestyle and not even think about, well, this happened at this point in my life. And this is why I'm acting and behaving and doing the things that I'm doing today. So now, since you have that definition, we have that trauma can be any form,
Any form
doesn't matter where it's at.
that's affecting you any way that you can see.
Yeah.
Because some people can't see
Mhm.
that trauma was affecting me. I couldn't see it either. It was brought out to me. So I always had a guilty complex that my siblings had to take care of me. And it might be something they're going through too. Because like I said, till this day, I don't care how old we are. I can call my siblings right now and be like, I'm in trouble. They there.
Mhm.
They don't care if it's financial, physical. It doesn't matter. They are there. I have siblings in other states that'll be there. I'll get the next flight out. Why would you need to fly out? But that's how they are.
Yeah.
That's how they are.
And but again, that could be a response of trauma because now they have is. I mean, I could say the same. My siblings have been there, more than others in different ways and different conversations, and
Right.
like I said, we don't know what that moment is, and that's the point we're trying to get to. And that's the point of Shell's Place, that we're trying to get you past this point. So now, how do we understand, we recognize what our trauma is, and there could be many, there could be one. Let's focus on one particular one, right?
Right.
Right now. This is what we want you to do.
Yeah. Find that
Find
trauma.
that trauma. How do we get a person to work through to see how they can be affected or how they've affected others?
And so now I told you how my trauma affected me. I shut people down. I don't want nobody to help me. So when I needed help, I didn't get it because I didn't want it. I wouldn't allow it. So that hindered me in a lot of positions. If you tell me I'm smart enough to build a train and I have to go get this train and I got it built, but I need somebody stronger than me to bring the material over, I'm not going to ask that person to bring the material over because I don't want them to help me. So guess what? I'm not going to build the train.
Hmm.
Now I've stopped everything in place because that trauma affected me that much. To where I don't want nobody to come back and tell me they had to do anything for me. So you're not going to tell me that. I'm not going to let you in.
We're not even going to get to that point.
We're not going to get to that point because you will never come back and tell me.
Right.
Now, how do I change that? I had to come with my big girl's pants and say they had to do what they had to do. That wasn't my fault. Now I can accept this and understand I didn't hold my siblings back. Even though they said they didn't get to play football or whatever they didn't get to do during that time when they had to babysit, because these were successful people. Like my brothers are very successful men. I didn't stop them, or they would be probably in the dungeons, some like on drugs or whatever. I don't know what they would be,
Right.
but I didn't stop them, even though they came out their mouth. I didn't stop anything. Right. They are powerful brothers. Period. And then I'm able to see that I didn't stop them. I didn't harm them. They just talking stuff.
They want, they can do that. Siblings, right?
Right. They just talking stuff. Right. And I was too sensitive to understand that stuff talking. I took it so personal. I tucked it in my heart and buried it. And then I wore it every day on my face. So now I have to step back and say, I didn't stop anything. Those guys kept going. They got wives, families, money, everything. I didn't stop anything. They made it. So now I can see that trauma was not even worth my time. I wasted a lot on that trauma. A lot. Because not only did they make it, they weren't even around me, and I carried that trauma in my head. They weren't even there when I was going through stuff. Why am I thinking about this? So now I can let it go. I can breathe. I can see that I didn't cause the harm that I was taking on because they made it. So now I'm understanding that part of my trauma. I don't ever want to hurt anybody. Never. That's always my intention. But sometimes we don't hurt people purposely. Sometimes we just hurt accidentally and don't realize it. So that's part of dealing with my trauma. I have to face it, I have to understand it, and now I have to run with it. For Tay, she had to face it. She understands that she did cause the trauma, but she also understands she shouldn't have been in that position.
And that's a part of it as well. Like you said, finally recognizing and being able to release it.
And being able to release it.
Because again, now we're looking at what's actually happening, what's reality, right? Because we talk a big thing about facts versus opinion, right? So in our mind, we can have this opinion that we have stopped or hindered somebody. But when you look at the facts, in Shell's case especially, she didn't hinder or stop anybody, right? Her siblings were able to be successful without her hindering them, even though in her mind she thought that. So that's the first step that you have to do is you have to look at the reality of what is going on. What are your actual facts versus just your opinion? If her brothers or anybody that she infected came out and they're now, you know, crackheads or did something, murderers, whatever, because of something that she did, then maybe that's different.
That's different.
Right. But at the end, that person still has to take that responsibility for their action because unless she actually put the thing in their hand to make them do it, there's no way she fully gets the blame for it. Just like you fully don't get the blame for what you are being told that you did. We play roles and we may cause traumas, but are we fully to blame for those? As you brought out on Shell's place, threefold trauma. Because there's always an action before a response. And that's the part that you have to start to see.
Because you'll learn on Shell's place that we've always been taught to point the finger. And we talked about this in our last segment. We want to stop pointing fingers. We don't flip things off. We don't care who caused our trauma. We want to care about fixing how it's making us feel. Whatever these people did, you don't need to go back and confront. You don't need to go point it out. You don't need to tell nobody. There is nothing there to do but fix and heal yourself. That's it. Yeah. They are relevant. Okay, they were involved, but they keep moving. They are not shifting the gears in your body right now. You are.
And one of the things that I always like when somebody said that if somebody's talking about you behind your back, guess what? It's none of your business.
Right. That's what it's supposed to be. Behind your back.
Behind your back and keep them there. And as we'll go further on into, as we continue to watch us, as we talk about these journeys, we'll talk about, like Shell mentioned briefly, you don't have to touch everything that's happened to you negatively. Because sometimes that can be a greater setback because you're not going to get the response that you think that you should get because you wouldn't approach this person for this situation like you did this to me. And they laugh at you and say, yeah, I know I did it. Now you done caused a whole nother set of
you might have gave them power or anything. And this is why what she's saying is so true. This is why we're talking about self. That's not self. No. That's outside, going back to those people you need to point fingers, talk about. That's you narrating somebody else. The only person you're in control of narrating is yourself. So what are we talking about? Self-worth? We're learning self-worth. That's you. That's not them. They might have been involved in wherever you was, but they ain't not in control of what's going on with you right now, unless you allow them to.
Exactly. And that, again, is that self-worth, getting to know yourself. Because you dealt with it already. Why set yourself back to go through it all over again? And to continue to keep yourself in a space that you are so ready to get out of. But if you go back and you do those things, then you're allowing that trauma to continue to keep repeating itself. And you stay in this circle, this loop, this never ending loop. But it's time to break that loop. Break out of the box, whatever it is you got to do.
Because you will start teaching yourself, if you don't break out of that box that she's talking about, you start teaching yourself, I'm stopped because I'm justifying this trauma this person did to me, and I can't move. That's not self. That's excuse for your self-worth. You're training your self-worth. So what's happening is we're teaching you how to take the victim off of you because you was a victim, but take it off of you. That victim is not there anymore. It's something that happened. Just like you ate some ice cream. Did that affect you? The ice cream is gone. Are we going to go back and blame that ice cream for disappearing because you ate it?
Exactly.
It's the same kind of concept. Are you a victim? Yeah, you're definitely a victim. Do I need it to hold me back the rest of my life? No,
No.
I don't. Unless I want to keep going back. And then I should go back to the person who did cause the trauma and start it over and do it again. Just that simple.
Keep that cycle going.
Let's do it again. Because I'm holding you here accountable with me, so I'm going to do it again. That's what you might as well do. We're working on self. How do we get them traumas up off? We first acknowledge that they're a problem, and then we accept that it's a problem, and then we allow it to go out of our way.
Don't let it be your definition.
Right. Self-worth. How many of you learned about self-worth today? How many of you even cared about self-worth until you landed on Shell's plates right now?
Probably didn't even cross your mind.
Probably never crossed your mind.
Here it is. And we're going to continue to drop these golden gems as we continue to light the tunnel so that we have that guidance all the way through to the end. And our next segment, we're going to talk about boundaries.
Boundaries.
That's another part of understanding self.
Self. So while we're changing self-worth and fixing our self-worth, we're now going to align it with some boundaries. So you're going to restart everything. That's what we do on Shell's Plate.
Yeah. We got you.
We got you.
Tune in next time. We'll see you there.